10, 12 years ago, it must have been, when 3D was going to be the big thing. And there was a talk by, it's a sort of business talk about what's the business model for 3D. And the lady speaking said, oh, well, there'll be a premium on the tickets. And I remember asking, well, if all films are 3D, if all films come out in 3D, how do you keep that premium? Is that premium always going to be there? And she said, yes, well, it'll be there forever. And I thought, well, actually, in the half-life of 3D, if you look at the 3D in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, there's always been a half-life. It's always tailed off quite rapidly. And I thought, well, I guess that ever is probably about 3 or 4 years. And I asked her, do you mean forever, or just forever? And she didn't really know what I was talking about, but I guess she was probably in her late 20s. And I don't think she sort of read enough about what happened in the 50s, and the fact that, some people can't see 3D anyway. It's headache inducing. There's a lot of technical stuff you've got to get right. And what it did do was accelerate the inputting of the investment in digital projection. It speeded up cinemas going digital, that's for sure. But as ever, 3D just sort of eventually nosedived, and nobody's doing it now. Hello, I'm David Sproxton, co-founder and executive chairman of Aardman Animations in Bristol in the UK. We've produced films like Chicken Run, Curse the Were-Rabbit, Flushed Away, After Christmas, and more recently, Early Man.
Chief!
Whoa, whoa, whoa! Ah!
Time to go hunting!
Bit early, isn't it, Doug?
Early Man is made in Dolby Atmos. It's an interesting mix. It's a fantastic thing if you've got a good cinema doing it and it's mixed well. This complete sort of 360 sort of surround sound. It's very, very immersive. And the big scenes at the end, the arena scenes, you get this big atmosphere and you very much feel there. It's a kind of immersive audio experience. Not every mixing studio is equipped for it yet, not every cinema is equipped for it yet, but we knew it was going to be installed in a lot of cinemas, and we thought, actually, let's do it in Dolby Atmosphere, so we did.
Right, grab a spear.
Oh, it's pointy.
I was state-educated, primary school, and then what they call a grammar school, which tends to lead you into universities. So I then went from grammar school in Surrey, not far from Heathrow Airport, to Durham University, where I studied geography, in fact. But I did a lot of theatre work, a lot of theatre lighting, a lot of theatre technical work, whilst doing my geographical studies. And that I enjoyed a lot, and that stemmed from my interest in photography and actually lighting, which goes back to when I was about 9 or 10, I think. So I was expected to get a kind of academic degree, but I wanted to do something practical, and I found the student theatre a great place to do that stuff. So when we came out, when I graduated, I had no real intention of using my geographical training, other than the fact that the way it taught me to analyse problems and look at things in a different way, which I still use to this day. But we had a kind of small contract. We've been making kind of quite amateur animated films for a little children's programme on BBC, and we had a contract to fulfil for that when Pete and I came out of our respective universities. So we went to Bristol to fulfil that little contract because the show we were working on was actually recorded in Bristol. So that's sort of what led into doing where we are now. We have a lot of different types of production. We have short-form commercial production. We have sort of longer-form television, like a TV series, and we have the feature films. And a producer is really somebody who really matches the money, the creative, and the logistics. So they are looking after the whole show. My role is a kind of Uber executive producer role. So we have line producers who actually on a day-to-day basis make sure everything runs to plan. And then Pete and I are sort of what they call executive producers, mainly because we own the studio. So we have a bigger, less day-to-day, but more overseeing, are the ideas right, are the deals right. My role, I did an awful lot of camera work when we first set up, so I have an interest in the technical side alongside the story side, and often on the bigger films come in at the beginning on the story reel, editorial. The production broadly then takes care of itself, and then I come back in as we go into final editing and post-production, audio, music, and final mixing, that kind of thing. Disgusting. I think stop frame, it's always retained a kind of a popularity. And I think, in a sense, we're being chased by the world of CGI, which is fantastic. Couple of things. One is the handcraftedness. You can see the handcraftedness on the screen. And I think people like that. They enjoy seeing something which maybe they could have made themselves at home if they had the time and the effort. And I think the other thing is actually you don't need quite as many people to make a stop frame film as you do a CG film of a certain level. So they can come in, the budgets can be kind of lower, certainly in terms of the quality. And that's kind of interesting. I think, certainly the CG systems are now getting smarter and better and more intuitive. But I think there's something lovely about the fact that you are seeing real paint, real fabrics, real lighting hitting real solids, real objects. And it's a different look. It's interesting, we do quite a lot of TV commercials which are done in CG. They look almost as if they're done using clay. And we do clay commercials as well, which almost look as if they're done using CG. And it really, in a way, it depends on the narrative. Obviously, we pride ourselves in doing lovely stop frame work. It's a curious activity in a way, because these days it might be seen to be quite sort of arcane and quite anachronistic in many ways when everybody is sitting behind screens doing things. But I think it's a little bit like, when actors talk about acting against a green screen, they don't quite know what they're doing. I'm just in this green screen, what is it about? And it's a bit the same with us. Although we do bits of green screen work, most of the animators are animating puppets in the sets that they're going to be that they're in. So it's more like a proper little stage. So they're more part of the whole film, whereas in CG, the animator's doing that element of it. They're just animating, but they're animating generally quite grey looking. I mean, they're not coloured. They've got a rig, but they're not in the set. They're not rendered at all, because that would just slow down the animation process. So they're animating something which actually doesn't actually connect terribly effectively with actually the scene they're building. So it's a bit more, it's a kind of bit more intellectual, I think, to be honest. Whereas, a puppet animator, once they've gone click, and then once the shot's done, generally that's it. There might be some taking out of support rigs, but the characters generally are in the set, and that's it. It's shot. So it's more of a performance, I think. I think the other key thing is that our animators are effectively our actors. It's very hard in stop frame to do frame 1, frame 12, frame 24, then go back and do frame 6 and frame 18 and do kind of the in-betweens. We'll block out what those keys positions may be, so we understand, the animator understands the timing that's needed. But when it actually comes to shoot it, it's straight ahead, as we say. It's frame 1 to frame 100, one at a time, in a forward direction. You can't go back and forth. So they have to get the action in their head. They are effectively slow motion performers. And again, that's a different kind of mindset. And I think when we've cross-trained our stop frame animators into CG, they've made mostly very, very good CG animators because they really understand that stuff. It probably works the other way around, but the CG animators come from a slightly different background. It's a slightly different way of doing things. Generally at Aardman, our CG animators will animate everything kind of by hand, almost frame by frame, but they will do their keys and things in the way that you would have done in 2D conventional animation. Is CG cheaper than stop frame? It depends on the complexity. In terms of, often it's quicker because you can industrialize it more. So you can get your characters made. You can be animating. You can have several animators animating the same character. You can have people working on backgrounds and design. So you can do it simultaneously. Those elements simultaneously. But I think if you looked at, and it depends on the complexity mostly of the character, the puppet characters. Clearly, you can make puppet characters in CG actually quite quickly because you've got preformed rigs. You know what the surfaces need to be, so you can build those relatively quickly. In stop frame, you physically got to build those one by one. You've got to build a metal armature, you've got to design the character, you've got to cast it. It's a lot more complexity in it. But I think when it comes to animation, you're probably quicker animating stop frame than you are CG, to be honest. It's something we've kind of looked at. They kind of come out about the same. In one, you can industrialize. You can multiply up the numbers in CG quite easily, because basically you can cut and paste the characters. Whereas in stop frame, if you want more puppets, you've got to build them. You can't just, as it were, cut and paste them. So I think when we did the Pirates film, I think we had 14 at least pirate captain characters, and that's quite a lot of characters to make just for that one character. I think a lot of models to make for that one character. Well, we started shooting first on video, then high definition video, and then digital on digital SLRs some time ago. So the features were all shot on 35mm up until the Pirates film, actually. But we had made A Matter of Life and Death. That was our first digital sort of long-form film. And I can remember that I was saying, look, I think we've been shooting digitally for commercial work. It's great. The technology's there. We've built a pipeline to do that. And there was a big concern about whether the picture quality would be good enough for theatrical release. So we said, look, we'll keep developing this digital pipeline for the Wallace and Gromit Matter of Life and Death, Loaf and Death. And if we haven't sorted that out within, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks of the start of the shoot, we'll bring the Mitchell 35mm cameras out of the cupboard, dust them off, and we'll shoot it on film. And I kind of knew that we would have built that pipeline, that we'd get there, which we did. And there's a certain amount of pushback on it. But once we started shooting, almost within about 3 or 4 days, they realised the benefits. The cameras are so much lighter. A Mitchell camera is huge, weighs, 20 kilos, huge, great lump of metal, big support systems, big tripods, lots of heavyweight stuff to support what is a very heavy camera to take a photograph on a little bit of film. So once you move to shooting on digital SLRs, basically stills cameras, whether it's Canons or Nikons, they're very lightweight. And just the first thing was the rigging time. The camera rigging time was much, much quicker and simpler. Getting low angle shots, you could just turn the camera over. That was much, much easier to do. And of course, the animators and directors could pretty well see almost exactly what they were going to get. Shooting on film, we had a video assist system. So you had a video tap on the camera, so the animators could see what they were doing. But it was quite a degraded picture. You were coming off the ground glass screen in the camera. The lens is obviously stopped down, so it's very low light. So it's quite noisy. And very often we would have working lights on, just flooding the set with light in order for the animator to have a better image coming through that video assist camera. And then when he took the shot, those lights would be turned off and the beauty lights, the set lights, would be put back on. So there was a kind of, from the animator's point of view, seeing more precisely what they're going to get was fantastic. From the director's point of view, you haven't got to wait for film to come back to make sure everything's technically correct and it's what you want. So that sped everything up, because the films went off at the end of the day, they'd come back the following morning, and there was this kind of gap where actually you were just waiting, to be honest. And then all the rushes would come back in the morning, and the director would be sitting over an editing machine going through all these rushes. So he couldn't do anything else. He couldn't, brief animators whilst that was going on. So that took up kind of half the morning, probably. Of course, now digital, you can see it on the screen. You can approve the shot as you go along, so things move much more quickly. And in a way, it's transformed everything we do. We now work on the Dragon software, which is fantastic. It's incredibly user-friendly. Animators love it. You can have a soundtrack there. You can import the animatic. It'll control the lights. It can control camera movements. So the workstation literally is that. Everything is sort of contained for the animator and the crew on that workstation. And really, there's no going back. And now the cameras are getting so much better. We're using the same lenses a lot of the time. We're using modified. We've got some lovely old Canon K35s. We're using a lot of Nikon lenses from the 70s and 80s. So we've kept all our glass, as we call it, but they're going on to different camera bodies as they evolve and get better and better. So it's been a fantastically positive move, without a doubt. You have problems. You just exchange one set of problems in a way for another, but in terms of production, it's sort of revolutionised the way we work. We've shot widescreen 235, so Pirates is widescreen. The next Shaun the Sheep film is going to be widescreen. but we're not shooting scope. In a way, we don't need to now, because the cameras we're using are what they call 8-perf. In old money, that would have been a VistaVision format. So digital stills cameras have taken the regular 35mm stills format, which is an 8-perf frame, as their target area. It's quite big, and actually we crop into that anyway. So to get a widescreen of 2.35 or 2.4 aspect ratio, you just crop into that chip and basically lose the top and the bottom, basically is what we do. But we've never used anamorphic lenses on our cameras, actually. And we talked about it, I think, at one point. Because what you were doing on film, you had, a more or less a square format, a 4-perf target. And to get what you were doing was squeezing the image into that, which you then unsqueezed at projection. So you had these squeezing and unsqueezing anamorphic lenses. But some of them aren't terribly good. And the other thing is we would have needed dozens and dozens of them. So if we've got 35 or 40 sets going, we would have needed 35 or 40 anamorphic lenses. And that would have been either very hard to find or incredibly expensive to get made. So we've never gone down that route. Disgusting. Well, we did. The pilot film was shot in 3D, and many years ago we had done other testing in 3D many years ago, actually on film, for an IMAX film we were going to make and a few other things. And the great joy of doing stop frame animation is that you can shoot it with one camera, and all you need to do is shift that camera across from left eye to right eye. And in fact, in terms of stop frame work, that movement is terribly, terribly small. So the convention is that the two camera views are broadly the human eyeball distance apart, what they call the interocular, which is about 75 millimeters. In old money, that's about 3 inches. So this distance. Now, if you shot model work with that interocular, that 75 millimeter interocular, it would look like they were models, because it gives you a sense of scale. So what we then do to get it to make the 3D look as if it's their scale, their world, you use the interocular of the models, of the characters. So, Gromit would be a good example. The distance between his eyeballs is really tiny. It's probably about half a centimetre. So the movement that we had to do on the cameras was really very, very small. So we just made these little automated sliding plates. We just moved the camera from right to left and then back again, and took 2 frames. So you had 2 streams of data, one left eye, one right eye. It's a complex process, and to get it right, you need to know what you're doing. Obviously in stop frame, you have a huge amount of control. You can control that interocular. You can widen it if you want to enhance the 3D-ness. You can narrow it down if you want to make it look. If you want to make things look further away, you can actually narrow it down and control that where it sits in the screen. But it does add a lot to the production budget. There's a kind of fixed cost because you've got to sort all that out in edit. You've got to, duplicate all the grading processes. You've got to put it all together. And of course, effectively, if you've got post-production in there, taking out rigs, green screen, all that's got to be duplicated for each eye, as it were. So it's expensive. And as we've seen at cinema, it hasn't really picked up. So on that question of 3D filming, so having made the Pirates as 3D, I don't think we'll be doing another 3D film. To be honest, I think we'll retain them as good 2D.
Hey!
We always refer back to The Wrong Trousers, Nick's, and Wallace and Gromit's The Wrong Trousers, only because it still stands up there as a beautiful sort of half-hour film. Very simple, 3 characters, 1 speaking part. It's a genre heist movie, but it still is incredibly moving, incredibly effective. And we're always trying to get back, in a way, to that sort of simplicity. Every film that you work on, you are passionate about. You want to get it as good as it can be. Certain subjects may or may not have quite as much appeal as in a sense, you may not be so attached if you're not directly related to the writing of it or the origination of it. But you're always throwing your weight behind every project we do. And of course, we're doing quite a lot of big kind of games and things now as well. And these are quite interesting projects to work on. But I think I'm still incredibly fond of the wrong trousers. And the sheer nuttiness of Curse of the Were-Rabbit is a great favourite. We screened that recently again at work. Hadn't seen it for a while, and I just thought this film is just so funny. It's so, the characters are just, you know, they are so much Nick's creation. Crazy bunch of villagers. Really great story. Great characters. We've got another Shaun the Sheep sequel coming through. I'll be showing a trailer to that later today, in fact, at FMX here. And there's a slate of other feature film projects coming up behind the next Shaun the Sheep movie. As I say, we're doing a big console game, which is a very interesting project around the kind of First World War, which is very interesting. We're looking at more immersive 4D experiences, again, probably around Shaun the Sheep. So yes, there's a lot happening, awful lot happening at work at the moment. 4D is one of those sort of experiences. It's a sort of visitor attraction thing. You know, it's a cinema where the seats shake and you get water poured all over you and the wind blows. Normally, probably actually in 3D. And there's sort of things that go into visitor. What do you call them? Kind of a theme park. Yeah, so 4D is a kind of a theme park type attraction. Normally a bit like a cinema-based event, but the seats will wobble, you'll have wind thrown at you and water thrown at you, and it'll be, you know, they're normally quite short, 10 or 12 minutes, almost a bit like a ride, but they're cinema-based. And these are getting incredibly sophisticated now, and very often, increasingly, the seats are actually on gimbals, on mechanisms which kind of throw you around. So it's halfway between a roller coaster ride and a sort of immersive cinema experience.